Since he first entered Formula One, Max Verstappen has been involved in many incidents, both on and off the track. He has been described as aggressive and amateur by some of his fellow drivers. What are the most controversial moments of his career, and how did his driving lead to a regulation change? Stay tuned to find out. First up, Monaco 2015, rookie crash with Romain Grosjean. We all remember our first day on the job, learning the ropes, making mistakes. It's normal, but if you're in Formula One, your first season can be deadly if you're not careful, and the track with the smallest margin for errors is definitely Monaco. So many drivers have touched the wall trying to push their cars for the ultimate lap time. But in 2015, Verstappen crashed straight into the back of someone. It was lap 64 of the 2015 Monaco Grand Prix, and Verstappen was chasing down Romain Grosjean for 10th place. Max was in a Toro Rosso at the time, and so he wasn't exactly fighting for the win, but he was fighting to prove himself. He was doing well to follow Grosjean and looked like he was getting close to overtaking him. But then, just before turning into the first corner, he crashed into the back of Grosjean, which sent Verstappen torpedoing into the wall. The crash registered a whopping 30 Gs of force on young Max, who was only 17 at the time. Max was blamed for the crash and penalized a 5-place grid penalty at the next race, but Max blamed it on Grosjean for braking at an earlier point than he did the lap before. Grosjean's trackside operations director disputed that, saying on Twitter later that the data they had proved that Grosjean actually braked 5 meters later. Max was confident that he hadn't made any mistakes and said that he would not be changing his style. Brave or reckless? In Formula One, it's a fine line. Next up, we travel to Hungary in 2017. It was only the opening lap, and Red Bull teammates Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo collided, which ended Ricciardo's race immediately. Ricciardo had already passed his teammate before Verstappen crashed into him on the second turn. When it was confirmed that it was Verstappen who hit him, Ricciardo called him a sore loser to his race engineer. Verstappen received a 10-second time penalty for the action, but Ricciardo was still angry after the race. In a post-race interview, he said that it wasn't an attempt to overtake or a racing move, but simply because Verstappen doesn't like people passing him. Max apologized for a mistake in the post-race interview, and then again to Ricciardo in a private meeting between the two. Daniel said afterwards that he had accepted his apology and was ready to move forwards. This was just one incident in a partnership that was full of tension and conflict. Hey, we can't always get along with our colleagues. Next, China 2018, Vettel's bad luck with the Red Bulls. No, Max, no. These were the cries from Martin Brundle as Max collided with Sebastian Vettel in another reckless move. Vettel was left puzzled when Verstappen braked very late and crashed into the side of him. Vettel was leaving him as much space as he could, but still got hit. Vettel was the pole sitter and was in third place at the time, but after the collision, he ended up finishing 8th, while Max still managed to finish 5th. Verstappen said after the race that it had nothing to do with being aggressive, but instead wanting it too much. Max apologized to Sebastian later and accepted full responsibility for his mistake. 2 years earlier, at the Russian Grand Prix, Daniel Kvyat was a driver at Red Bull and also crashed into Vettel. Afterwards, Sebastian had some words with his former employers at Red Bull, which looked like it led to Kvyat being demoted to Toro Rosso. Whether or not Sebastian had a hand in that is still unclear, but it was Max who was promoted to the Red Bull team in his place. After the Chinese Grand Prix, Vettel may have been regretting that talk though. How did Verstappen's behavior lead to a regulation change? And who did Verstappen almost punch in the face? Don't go anywhere to find out. Up next, Brazilian Grand Prix 2018. Punch-up with Esteban Ocon. The 2018 Brazilian Grand Prix looked like it was well and truly over at the halfway point. Max was cruising out ahead and building his advantage over Lewis Hamilton, who was trailing in second place. That was until lap 44, when Max collided with Force India driver Esteban Ocon. Max was lapping Ocon, while Ocon was trying to unlap himself and didn't let him pass as easily as he had hoped. As they turned into turn 1, it first looked like Max had gotten past, but then Ocon turned and then hit each other. For those that don't know, drivers who are running very far behind the race leaders are called backmarkers and have the right to unlap themselves after being lapped. That's unless there are blue flags shown, which means that they must allow the leaders to pass them. There were no blue flags shown, but that didn't help cool Max after the race. For the crash, the stewards gave Ocon a stop-and-go penalty, but he got extra punishment after the race. While still in the car, Max radioed to his engineer to tell him that he better not be able to find Ocon after the race. He did find him. He pushed Ocon several times, while Ocon seemed to protest his innocence. Max said after that he didn't regret his actions, and that he was provoked by Ocon smiling at him and being a P-word that we won't repeat here. Verstappen was ordered to do 2 days of public service for his actions. Max's hot head may be the secret to his driving, but it sure does get him in a lot of trouble too. Next, we have Italy 2021, getting on top of Hamilton. Thank God for the halo. Verstappen and Hamilton collided a number of times over the 2021 season, but it was in Monza that a collision showed just how emotional the season was getting. On lap 26, Hamilton had just had a slow pit stop and came out of the pits side by side with Verstappen. Going into turn 2, they were both unwilling to give any space, and Max's car bounced on a sausage curb to land on top of Hamilton's car. They were both left parked off the side of the road, with the Red Bull resting on top of the Mercedes. Slow motion footage showed that Max's car tire did knock Hamilton's head before being stopped by the halo safety device above the driver's head. Without the halo, he would have been seriously injured or worse. But that wasn't the end of the drama. Lewis said after that race that he was surprised that Max didn't check on him after he got out of the car, and that the accident was a big shock. Max said that the best thing for him to do then was to walk away. Former world champion Damon Hill said that the crash showed a lack of self-control by Verstappen. The stewards agreed and gave Verstappen a 3-place grid penalty for the next race. Next up, Abu Dhabi 2021, a season divider. We couldn't make this list without mentioning last year's finale. Now, this one wasn't Max's fault, but it was a big controversy, maybe one of the biggest controversies in F1 history. Amazingly, Max and Lewis went to the final race of last year equal on points. They had already proven that they were both worthy of the title. Lewis was leading the race comfortably and on track to secure his record 8th world championship. But after a safety car, Red Bull went for a bold strategy and called Max in for an extra tire change to improve his speed. It looked like this wasn't enough until Nicholas Latifi crashed on lap 53 and brought out a safety car. The controversy came when the race director, Michael Massey, instructed only selected cars to unlap themselves and clear the way for a last lap battle between the two championship contenders. The result was dramatic, and Verstappen was able to overtake Hamilton to claim his first world championship. But there were immediately protests about manipulation and foul play from F1 fans, commentators, and even some drivers. Mercedes launched appeals to the FIA, but they were rejected. Despite the controversy, Max has said that his title is not tarnished and that he was the deserving champion for 2021. What do you think? I think we'll be debating this one for years to come. Now we have the Azerbaijan Grand Prix 2018. Teammates without teamwork. Can you tell that these two were competitive? Once again, it was Daniel and Max at Red Bull, crashing into each other and ending both their races. It was lap 40, and everything seemed to be going pretty well for Red Bull. They had their cars in 4th and 5th position, behind the 2 Mercedes and 1 Ferrari. It was clear that there were no team orders coming from Red Bull because the two drivers were racing hard against each other. Then, shortly after Verstappen had overtaken Ricciardo came up behind to retake the position. He faked once to the right before swerving to the other side. Max blocked him on the right before moving to the left to block Ricciardo again. Under F1 regulations, moving under braking is likely to receive a penalty because it is considered an abnormal change of direction. This rule was made explicit after the 2016 season and was known as the Verstappen rule because it was largely a response to Max's defensive driving style. It was then changed to have a broader meaning that was just concerned with dangerous maneuvers instead of specifically moving under braking. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.